The parking structure on level 3 of the Galleria smelled like cold concrete and somebody's leftover coffee. And Naomi Clark sat in the driver's seat of a car she had not yet started, holding her phone in both hands like it owed her money. Her knuckles were ash pale against the black case. The dome light above her head clicked off, then on again when she shifted, then off, and she did not move to fix it. Outside her window, a woman in heels walked past with 3 glossy shopping bags, the paper handles biting into her fingers. A Prada storefront glowed at the far end of the corridor. A Gucci sign reflected white off the polished floor. None of it touched her. 40 minutes earlier, her sister's name had appeared on the screen. Diane. Seoul. 2 weeks overdue for their call. Naomi had answered on the first ring with a grin already in her voice, ready to make fun of her for falling behind, and a man had answered instead. Calm, careful. Older than her, maybe, not by much. He had said her sister's name first, as if to confirm he had the right person. Then he had said the word accident. Then he had said the word stable, twice, the second time slower, as if he understood that the first one had not landed. He told her he would handle the arrangements. He told her he would call again. He hung up before she could ask if Diane was awake, before she could ask which hospital, before she could ask who in God's name he was. She had not started the car since. Her thumb hovered over Terrence's name in her favorites. Terrence, who had not been her boyfriend for 14 months, and who still, in the back closet of her chest, was the only person she had ever called, when she did not know what to do with her own hands. She tapped the microphone. The red dot pulsed. Terrence, she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt, which was its own kind of warning sign. Something happened to Diane. Some man called from her phone. He said she's in the hospital. He said she's stable. He wouldn't say which one. He hung up. He said his name. He said... She swallowed. Lee Jun-ho, that's the name. Diane mentioned him once, I think, the husband's associate, the one she said was kind. Terrence, I don't know what to do. I'm in a parking garage. I'm shaking. Please call me. She hit send without looking. The little blue checkmark turned green. She did not know yet that her phone had autofilled the wrong contact. She did not know that the voice message was already crossing 12 time zones. She did not know that in Seoul, in a glass-walled office above the Han River, a man whose wife had been buried 2 years and 4 months ago was about to hear her say his name. Stay with me here. Take a second to subscribe before we go any further, because the man on the other end of that message has known about her for 3 years, and what he does next is not what you think. The truth was that Naomi had always processed the world out loud. Her mother used to say she came out of the womb narrating. In college, her roommates had learned to ignore the steady stream of voice notes she left herself while pacing the kitchen, working out a paper, an argument, a feeling she had not yet named. By the time she was 29 and 3 years deep in a paralegal job at a mid-tier firm on Smith Street, the habit had become something closer to a nervous system. She did not call people. She did not type. She walked, she drove, she stood in elevator lobbies, and she talked into her phone like the phone was a sister, a priest, a witness. She had 2 real sisters. One had moved to Atlanta and built a quiet life around a quiet husband. The other had moved to Seoul. Diane was the older one by 4 years, and the braver one by every measure Naomi could think of. She had met a Korean man on a work trip and married him 8 months later, and the family had received the wedding photograph by email, and their mother had cried for 2 days, not from grief, but from the specific ache of a daughter who had stopped asking permission. Naomi had been the only one who refused to be hurt by it. She had played the voice message Diane sent her, 23 minutes, recorded in a Seoul taxi at 2 in the morning. And she had listened to her sister laugh, and she had thought, all right, she's home. That was 3 years ago. Diane called every 2 weeks. She sounded happy. Naomi had known her long enough to know that Diane sounded happiest when she was working hardest to protect someone from worry, and so Naomi had quietly catalogued every 2-week call, listening underneath the words. Underneath the words, there had always been something. A pause that lasted half a second too long when Naomi asked about her husband. A laugh that was real, but careful. The repeated, almost casual mention of a man Diane referred to once as Junho, my husband's closest. He's the reason none of us have anything to worry about. Then she had never said his name again. Naomi had saved a number in her contacts that afternoon. Diane had read it to her over the phone, slowly, the way you read someone an address before a hurricane. Save this, Diane had said. Don't text it, don't dial it. If something ever happens to me and you can't reach me, this is who you call. I trust him. Naomi had saved it under emergency. These people? Because Diane laughed when she suggested it, and they had moved on to talking about their mother's knees. She had never opened the contact since. The voice message she had just sent to Terrence had been autofilled to that number. She did not know it yet. She put the phone face down on the passenger seat. She started the car. She drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off, and when she got to her apartment, she sat on her kitchen floor with her back against the dishwasher and waited for Terrence to call. He did not call. She fell asleep on the tile. In Seoul, it was 11:47 at night. Lee Jun-ho was at his desk on the 32nd floor of a building he did not own on paper, looking out at the dark ribbon of the Han River and the lit bridges crossing it. He was 36 years old. He had been the head of the Seoul arm of his organization for 9 years. He was wearing a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and a watch his wife had given him on their 2nd anniversary, and an expression that the men who worked for him had long ago learned to read as nothing in particular, which was the most dangerous of his expressions. His private secondary line buzzed. A number he had given, through an intermediary, to one specific family 3 years ago, under a name that traced to nothing. He looked at it for a long moment before he picked it up. The message was 46 seconds long. He listened to it once with his eyes open. He listened to it again with his eyes closed. He set the phone down on the desk, screen up, and he placed his palm flat beside it, not on it, and he did not move for a long time. She sounded the way Diane had said she would sound. Running toward something, unsure if she was ready to arrive. He did not call her back that night. He sat with the message until the river went black and the bridges blurred, and the city below him forgot to be loud. Somewhere underneath everything else he was feeling, which was a list he had not allowed himself to keep in 2 years and 4 months, there was a single clean thought, and the thought was that Diane had known. Diane had always known. Diane had given her sister this number under a different name and called it an emergency line, and Diane had been right. She had only failed to mention whose. At 7 a.m, Houston time, Naomi's phone rang. She picked up off the kitchen floor with her cheek printed in linoleum and her hair flat on one side. "Miss Clark," he said. His English was very good. The accent was there, but smoothed by years of use. "My name is Lee Jun-ho. We have not met. Your sister is stable. She is in Asan Medical Center in Seoul. A flight has been booked for you out of George Bush Intercontinental at 4:18 this afternoon. The confirmation has been sent to your email. A driver will meet you at Incheon." Naomi sat up slowly. "Who are you?" she said. "I was your sister's husband's most trusted associate," he said. "Diane asked me 3 years ago to be reachable if anything happened. I am being reachable. You called me last night from her phone?" "I did." You hung up on me. I did. I apologize. I did not yet have all of the information I wanted you to have before I told you anything. She closed her eyes. She listened, not just to his words, but to the room around him. There was no room sound, no traffic, no office hum, no television. He was somewhere quiet, on purpose. Did she ask for me? Naomi said. There was a pause. It was half a second too long. She has not been conscious, he said. But yes, she asked for you a long time ago. I am only doing what she asked. Naomi did not respond. She read the silence on the other end of the line in less than 4 seconds and found 3 things in it. He was telling the truth. He was tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. And he was, for reasons she could not yet locate, terrified of her. I'll be on the flight, she said, and hung up. 16 hours later, she walked off the jet bridge at Incheon into a corridor full of light and the smell of new carpet, and a man in a charcoal coat was holding a small white card with her name on it in his right hand. He was not Junho. He was perhaps 50, soft-faced, polite, and he bowed slightly and took her single suitcase as if she had asked him to, which she had not. His name, he said, was Mr. Han. He drove her into the city with the radio off and answered every question she asked with one sentence, no more. And when she asked him how long he had worked for Mr. Lee, he said, "Long enough, ma'am," and she did not push. The hospital was tall and clean and smelled like every hospital. Diane was in a private room on the 8th floor. Her face was bruised on the left side. Her hands were still. Naomi sat by the bed for a long time and did not record anything, which was the first time in years she had been with a person she loved and not narrated it to herself out loud. When she finally turned, Lee Jun-ho was standing in the doorway. He was taller than she had expected and quieter. He was dressed in a black suit with no tie and a long, dark coat over his arm, and he looked like a man who had been informed that mourning had a dress code and had complied. He did not step into the room. He waited at the threshold until she nodded, and then he came in 2 steps and stopped. "Naomi," he said. He said it the way one might handle something fragile and not yet identified. She stood. She read him in under 4 seconds, and what she found was not what she had braced for. He was not dangerous in the way she had been taught to expect dangerous men to be. He was dangerous in the way that very still water is dangerous. He did not perform calm. He simply was calm, the way a room is empty. "Mr. Lee," she said. "Junho is fine." "Junho," she said. The name fit oddly in her mouth, like a coat that belonged to someone else. "Thank you for the flight, and the driver, and the room across the street that I assume you also arranged?" He inclined his head. He had not arranged her hotel room across the street, or rather, he had, but he had not expected her to know that he had. She watched him register the fact that she had known, and she watched him decide not to lie about it, and she filed the entire exchange away. He left after 20 minutes. Before he left, he set a paper cup of coffee on the table beside her chair without comment. She did not look at it until he was gone. It was a cortado, 2 sugars, the exact way she took it on Tuesdays when her morning was hard. She had not told him her coffee order. She did not say anything. She drank it. It was good. That night in the hotel room, she opened her laptop and started a document the way she would start any other intake file. Name, date of contact, initial impressions, inconsistencies. She typed for 2 hours. She did not record a voice message to anyone, which was its own data point, which she also noted. The next morning, he met her in the hospital lobby with a coat over his arm. Hers, from the hotel. The coat she had left on the back of the chair in her room. "It's colder today," he said. "The wind off the river." She took the coat. She did not ask how he had it. She let him hold the door for her. She let the warmth of the lining settle on her shoulders, and she felt the half-step gap between what she knew and what he was telling her widen by a quiet inch. The third time was the smallest. They were walking from the hospital parking lot to the elevator, and she was on the phone with her mother, and she said, in passing, that she was tired, and he, walking 3 steps behind her, said quietly without looking at her, "There is a tea downstairs. Boricha. It is good for sleeping." She had drunk boricha exactly once in her life, in a Korean restaurant in Houston 6 months ago with a friend. She had liked it. She had mentioned it to no one but a voice message she had recorded and never sent. She stopped walking. He stopped too. She turned. He met her eyes. He did not look away. "Mr. Lee," she said, and her voice was very level, which is the voice she used at work when she was about to ask a witness a question they had been hoping she would not ask. "How do you know that?" He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he said, "Your sister mentioned it once, a long time ago." It was a clean answer. It was also a lie, and she knew it was a lie because she had never told Diane about the boricha. She had never told anyone about the boricha. She had only spoken it into her phone. She did not press. She nodded. She walked into the elevator. She watched the floor numbers light up, one by one, and she felt something in her chest reorganize itself into a question she did not yet know how to ask. If you are leaning forward right now, stay with me. The next part is where the floor she's been standing on stops being the floor. That night, in the apartment Jun-ho had arranged for her, because the hotel was no longer practical, he had said, with a small bow that did not quite apologize. He sat alone in his office and listened to her voice message for the 11th time. His phone was on his desk, and his hands were not. He had not touched the phone since the second listen. He let the recording play through the small speaker, her voice in the room with him, the way it had been every night since it arrived. And when it ended, he sat in the silence after it, the way one sits in a church after the service has been dismissed. He thought about the rooting structure. He thought about the apartment building's parent company, which he had quietly acquired in the spring of the year Diane died, because Diane had asked him in the last conversation they had ever had. A Tuesday, 11 in the morning, she on her way out the door to a meeting she would not return from, to make sure her sister was safe. He thought about the law firm in Houston, where a senior partner had received an anonymous endowment 2.5 years ago, and had, in gratitude and in ignorance, kept a paralegal named Naomi Clark on through 3 rounds of layoffs. He thought about the scholarship fund whose disbursement had paid off the last of her student debt 8 months ago, a fund he had created with the express purpose of looking entirely unrelated to anything. He had been writing her voice messages for 2 years and 7 months. She had received every one. She had read none of them. He had told himself, for 2 years and 7 months, that this was a promise to a dead wife. It was, he thought now, with her voice still in the room, also something else. He did not have a word for the something else yet. He did not allow himself one. He turned off the phone. He went to bed. He did not sleep. Naomi did not sleep either. She was in the apartment with her laptop open on the small kitchen table, and she was looking at the lease. She had asked the building manager that afternoon, in passing, who owned the building. He had been polite and vague. She had gone home and pulled the corporate filing online, because pulling corporate filings was something she did every working day of her life, and she had followed the holding company up 2 layers and stopped at the 3rd because the 3rd was a name she did not recognize and could not search past on a public database. She had emailed a friend at the firm. The friend had emailed her back at 3 in the morning Seoul time with a single sentence and an attachment. She read the attachment twice. She closed her laptop. She did not record a voice message about it. She made a cup of tea, and she sat at the table with her hands wrapped around the cup, and she did not move for a long time. She understood then several things at once. She understood why he had known about the coffee. She understood why he had known about the boricha. She understood that there was almost certainly a record, somewhere, of every voice note she had sent into the air over the last 2 years and 7 months, and that someone, not him, she did not think it was him, not directly, had been listening to her life the way she had been listening to Diane's, half a beat under the words. She understood that the man who had bought her safety had also bought, without meaning to, the right to be the most important person in her life that she had never met. She did not feel angry. That was the thing that frightened her. She felt seen. She spent the next 4 days doing what she did best. She read the room of his life in pieces. She watched the men around him. She watched Mr. Han, who drove her and who handed her coffee that was always correct, and who never once said a word he had not been authorized to say. She watched a younger associate named Park Min-soo, who came to the hospital twice and who always took his coffee black with 2 sugars stirred counterclockwise. Exactly counterclockwise, every time, even when the spoon was in his left hand. She watched the way Junho stood at thresholds before entering rooms, as if he were giving the room a chance to refuse him. She watched the way his men looked at him when he was not looking at them. And what she saw in their faces was not fear. It was something more dangerous than fear. It was a kind of devotion that did not need to be earned twice. On the 5th day, she found a coat at the back of a closet in the apartment, in a garment bag that had not been opened. It was a woman's coat, camel-colored. Diane's. She had bought it together with Naomi in Houston 4 winters ago, in a department store on Westheimer. She sat on the floor of the closet with the coat in her lap, and she did not cry. She thought about her sister, who had handed her a phone number on a quiet afternoon and said, "Save this, it's for emergencies." She thought about how Diane had read out the number slowly and watched her save it. She thought about the casual specificity of it, the deliberate quiet. She thought about how Diane had always been the one who decided, before anyone else did, who in the world was going to matter to whom. That night, she did not record a voice message. She walked downstairs and she got in a car and she went to find him. He was in his office. He looked up when she came in. He did not ask how she had gotten past the men at the door. The men at the door had been instructed 2 years and 7 months ago to let her past if she ever came. She sat down across from him without being invited. She set a printed document on the desk between them. The corporate filing, the holding company, the scholarship fund, the endowment to the law firm, the acquisition date of the parent company of her apartment building. She set them down one by one, the way you lay out exhibits in a deposition. "I read rooms quickly," she said. "I have my entire life. I read this one in 4 days, which is slow for me." He looked at the papers. He looked at her. He did not deflect. "All true," he said. "How long?" 2 years, 7 months. "Why?" He was quiet for a long time. She did not fill the silence. She had learned, somewhere in her 20s, that the only way to find out what a person was actually capable of saying was to refuse to rescue them from the question. "Because Diane asked me to," he said, and then, after another silence in which he visibly chose, "And because at some point in the last year, I stopped doing it because Diane asked me to." She looked at him. He did not look away. That is the first time I have said that out loud, he said. To anyone, since she died. She closed her eyes for a moment, then she opened them. One question, she said. I don't want the answer tonight. I want you to think about it. The answer matters. Ask. If Diane had not asked you, she said, would you have found me anyway? He did not answer immediately. He did not pretend to. He simply held the question, the way he had held her coat on the cold morning, with his eyes lowered, and he said, I will tell you when I know. She stood up. She walked to the door. She turned at the threshold and said, Thank you for the coffee, and for the coat, and for the apartment, and for the 8 months of no student debt. Her voice did not shake. I'm not forgiving you for any of it. I'm also not leaving. I want you to understand both of those things at the same time. I understand both of those things, he said. She went home and slept for 9 hours. The next morning, Diane opened her eyes. It was a small thing. The nurse called Naomi first because Naomi had asked to be called first, and Naomi was in the room within 20 minutes, and Jun-ho was already there, standing 2 steps inside the door with his coat still on, as if he had not been sure he was allowed to be in the room and had been waiting for someone to give him permission. Diane's eyes were unfocused for a long moment. Then they were not. She looked at Naomi. Then she looked, slowly, at Jun-ho. Then she looked back at Naomi. Her mouth moved. No sound came out at first. Then a small, dry word. Good, she said. That was all. Then her eyes closed again, and the monitor kept its steady pace, and the nurse said this was normal. This was good. She was awake now in the way that mattered. Naomi stood at the side of the bed for a long time. She looked at the bruise on her sister's temple. The shape of it. It had been 4 weeks since the accident. The bruise had faded to yellow at the edges, but the center of it, the place where the impact had landed, was a specific shape Naomi could not stop looking at. She had grown up with this face. She had pressed cold washcloths against this face after every scraped knee and bike fall and bad date of their shared childhood. She knew the bones of it. She knew where Diane had hit her head when she fell off the swing at 8 years old, and she knew where Diane had been struck by a softball at 12, and she knew, looking at this bruise, that the shape of it did not match the shape of a steering wheel or a dashboard or a window frame. It matched the shape of a knuckle. She did not say anything in the room. She left the room. She walked down the hall. She stopped at the window at the end of the corridor, and she stood with her forehead against the glass for a long time, and she breathed. Then she went and found Jun-ho. She told him quietly, in the small family lounge with the door closed, what she had seen. She told him she could be wrong. She told him she had grown up looking at this face, and she did not think she was wrong. She watched him go very still. The stillness was not new. The thing inside the stillness was new. He did not answer her for a long minute. Then he said, Show me. She showed him. He looked at the bruise. He looked at it the way a man looks at something he has missed. He did not say anything in the room either. In the hallway, he said, very quietly, It was meant for me. She did not understand at first. Then she did. He had a list, he said, of people who could get close enough to Diane to do that. The list was short. He had vetted every name on it himself, every quarter, for 3 years. He had been wrong about exactly one of them. He did not say which one. He did not have to. Naomi had been watching the men around him for 5 days, and she remembered, suddenly and completely, Park Min-soo stirring his coffee counterclockwise with his left hand every single time, and she remembered a detail Diane had mentioned years ago in a voice message Naomi had listened to twice. Diane describing, with affectionate amusement, a young associate of her husband's, who stirred his coffee counterclockwise no matter which hand he used, because his mother had told him as a child that clockwise was bad luck. Diane had said the name. Diane had said, "Park Min-soo, sweetest of the bunch, but be careful. The sweetest ones are always the ones with something to prove." Naomi said the name out loud. Jun-ho closed his eyes. "Yes," he said. She would not let him go alone. That was the first fight. It was not loud. He told her, with the exact courtesy that was his weapon, that he would handle it. She told him, with the exact courtesy that was hers, that he would not. She had built her career on the principle that the strongest evidence in any room was a sworn statement and a recording. And she had a phone full of voice messages going back 2 years, and she had a paralegal's understanding of how an internal investigation looked when it was done properly. And she would not allow the man who had killed her sister to disappear into a back room and be handled. She wanted him alive. She wanted him recorded. She wanted him sworn. Jun-ho did not like the plan. He listened to it twice. He agreed. They did it 3 days later, in a private dining room at a restaurant in Gangnam that Park Min-soo had been invited to, under a pretext he would not have refused. Naomi was at the next table, behind a folding screen, with her phone running and a small recorder in her purse, and Mr. Han across from her pretending to read a menu. Jun-ho sat with Park Min-soo for 41 minutes. He did not raise his voice once. He spoke about loyalty in a way that was not a threat. He spoke about Diane in a way that was. He laid the bruised photograph on the table between them, the same way Naomi had laid out her exhibits, and he watched Park Min-soo look at it and watched the small specific tell happen. Park Min-soo reached for his coffee, and he stirred it counterclockwise with his left hand, and Naomi behind the screen closed her eyes because that was the confession before the confession. He spoke. They had what they needed. He had thought, he said quietly, that the only way to move Lee Jun-ho off his structural axis was to remind him that grief had a sister. He had been right about the axis. He had not been right about who would catch the fall. He went, after that, where men like him go, by the legitimate means available to the legitimate parts of Jun-ho's organization, which were more numerous than Naomi had expected. He did not vanish. He went on a record. Naomi had insisted. Diane came home from the hospital 11 days later. She walked slowly. She held Naomi's elbow. She looked in the doorway of the apartment Jun-ho had bought for her and her husband 3 years ago, at her younger sister, and at the man who had been her husband's closest associate, standing 2 steps apart, not touching, and her face did something neither of them was quite ready to read. It looked mostly like the face of a woman who had decided something a long time ago and was watching it finally happen on the schedule she had set. She squeezed Naomi's elbow once. She said, "Good." It was the second time she had said it. Naomi stayed in Seoul through the end of the season. She did not move there. She did not stay forever. She flew back to Houston in early March, and she took her job back, and she kept her apartment, and she also, quietly, kept a second small one in Itaewon that Jun-ho had not bought for her, that she had signed for herself, in her own name, on her own salary, because she was 29 years old, and she had been buying her own coats since she was 19. He flew to Houston in April. He met her mother. Her mother read him in under 4 seconds and said nothing, which Naomi understood to be the highest compliment her mother had ever paid a man. There was no proposal. There was, instead, a Tuesday evening in late spring, in her Houston apartment, when she was sitting at her kitchen table with her phone in her hand and the red dot pulsing, ready to record a voice message to herself about something small she had been turning over all day. She held the phone for a long moment. She looked at the wall. She looked at him on the couch behind her, reading something on his laptop with his sleeves rolled to the elbow and that watch on his wrist. She did not record the message. She put the phone down. She did not need to process out loud. She did not need to send the feeling somewhere first to make sure it was real. The feeling was sitting 15 feet away from her with his sleeves rolled up. She was simply present in it. For the first time in her life, she did not need to be running toward anything. She had, by the longest possible route, arrived. She thought briefly about a parking structure in the Galleria on a cold Tuesday evening when she had sat in a car holding a phone like it owed her money. She thought about the message she had sent into the dark. She thought about Diane, who had read out a number slowly years ago and said it was for emergencies and had been right without specifying whose. She thought she sounded like she was always running toward something and wasn't sure if she was ready to arrive. She was ready. If any part of this story landed somewhere tender in you, leave a comment and tell me which scene was the one that opened the door. Subscribe so the next story finds you the way this one did. And if there is someone in your life who has been running toward something for a long time without knowing if they are ready to arrive, send them this. They will know what to do with it